Hello, artists and artisanal cheeses. My name is Seaberskyne, and I have a bad habit of underestimating my audience, I think. You may know I have a Discord server for the channel that I set up because a bunch of people in the comments were like, hey, do you have a Discord server for the channel? We'd love to come and hang out and talk. And so I set up a Discord server with the I just made a server and then put like a couple of rooms in it and didn't really think more about it and posted the link. And I was like, yeah, it's going to be like 10, 15, 20 people are going to show up, and we're going to have a nice little community where we can talk, and that's going to be fine and fun. And then, like, within hours, there was like 150 people there, all talking, all saying, hey, this is a thing, and oh, can we have this room? Can we have that room? What about moderation? Where are the rule sets? Can we have special roles? And it's like, I'm sitting there like, oh my god, help, I didn't want this. Kind of overwhelmed by it all, and I was like slamming on the brakes and just closing the whole Discord down so that nobody else could get in while I tried to put out all the fires and figure out where all the pieces go and how, you know, a Discord server works. Like, how do you moderate it? How do you create roles? I had to learn a lot of things really quickly. So anyway, I've been letting people in relatively slowly since then, like 25 per video I make. I put out a link and 25 people can get in and stuff. And I was like, after I sort of put out the fires and calmed things down a little bit, I was like, yeah, I'm going to let people in a little bit, and then we'll get to like a couple of hundred, and then nobody else is going to be interested, and then there's not going to be more people coming in. Once again demonstrating that I had learned nothing from the first encounter, because the Discord now has over 1,000 members, most of whom are actually active on a fairly regular basis, at least if the data I have available from the Discord settings are to be believed. So, what's my point with all this? Well, I'll get to that. This is story time with Uncle TV's guy, and you're gonna have to bear with it because this is a little self-indulgent, and I hope you will indulge me. One of the amazing things that happened when I set up the server and people started asking, hey, can we have a thing for artists to post their work, or writers to talk about writing and stuff? And I just kind of set up the rooms because I was still in putting out fires mode. Yeah, you can have a room. There's a room. There's some roles. And I was just kind of running around. And while I kind of wasn't looking, they got together and started doing things. Like the artists started having themes. Like they would do a poll and pick a theme, and then everybody would kind of make some kind of artwork based on that, and then they'd post it and they'd talk about it, and then they'd all vote on the next theme. And the writers are doing writing sprints, which is something I didn't know about, but it's a thing where you do 30 minutes where you're just writing stuff, no editing, no worrying about anything. You're just writing stuff, and then you post it, and then people talk about it. They give each other feedback on this stuff, and it's something they do like very, I don't know if it's on daily or if it's weekly, because it's hard to keep up with everything that's going on in there, but people just started little projects. Like, they started doing things together in groups, and that wow, a little mind-blowing, because again, I have very little to do with that. Like, I've been so busy doing all kinds of other stuff, so that's just kind of happened on its own. And so people started asking on the Discord server, hey, do you want to maybe do a video about some of the stuff we've been doing here? Because we've been doing some cool stuff. It's been really fun. To which my response, of course, was, yeah, I would love to do that, because I'm quite proud of it, of the stuff of all the creative collaboration and stuff that's been going on in there, in spite of the fact that none of it is really my credit. Like, it's not, I didn't really do anything. I just kind of made a room, and then people came along and filled it up with good things. So yes, I wanted to do a video, and once again, I managed to not learn my lesson, because I set up this room and I say, okay, if you're an artist, a visual artist, and you have some work that you have already done, like, don't create any new work for this thing. If you have some stuff you have already done and you'd like to show it off and you'd like me to spend a little bit of time talking about it, post it in this room, and I'm going to include it in a video somewhere down the line. You know, along with a description and a link to your social media or your gallery or whatever. And I was like, yeah, it's going to be like maybe a dozen people or something. It's going to be fine. It's not going to be that many. And then, because I do not learn my lesson. I do not learn my lesson. there's a little bit more work than we can probably get to in one video, especially when I've already spent 5 minutes just setting up the premise of the whole thing. So anyway, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to try and go through as many as I can say something interesting about. And I'm going to look at the artwork that has been posted. I'm going to try and say offer some stuff I like about it. Like this, if you know my other videos, I tend to be critical, very critical. I tend to nitpick. I tend to pick at little things and be like, oh, this thing could be better and that thing could be better. I'm not going to do that here because that feels really dickish. And also because I don't think it would be that useful. I'm going to talk about the stuff I like about each piece I look at. And then if I have some suggestions for improvement, I'll offer them. But these are not critical pieces. This is not a critical video. There's going to be links to the online presence that the artists have chosen to include with their submissions. Like if they have a gallery or a Twitter or something, it's going to be included there in the same order as they come up on screen. And I'm going to try and mention their names very clearly so that we can all see exactly where people are. Sorry for clearing my throat and stuff. I've had a little bit of a frog in my throat all day. There's a little bit of formula. I asked specifically in the room whether the people who were submitting their work would be okay with the video being monetized. And 93% of the people who responded out of 137 votes are okay with the video being monetized. So for now, it's monetized. Although I have to confess, I have some rather mixed feelings about it because it was people telling me that I should monetize the video when I said I wanted to do it unmonetized, and I was like, I kind of didn't want to make any money off of doing this thing. But people said I should, and then I was like, okay, but then I need the consent of at least a vast majority of the people who are submitting in order for me to monetize this thing. So I'm hoping everybody's okay with it. And there's also the issue that if a video is unmonetized, it doesn't get as many views as a video that's monetized, which makes sense because YouTube wants to serve ads and it doesn't want to not serve ads. So there's also that. If I want this video to actually be shown off as wide as possible, monetization is genuinely a good search engine optimization, which is kind of weird. Anyway, that's way too much intro. Let's actually get into it. Nyx the Nocturnal, who's called the same thing on Instagram. Just gonna load it up here. It's this person. You should go and find them, and you can go and follow them. By the way, that's one of the things I'm hoping to encourage with this video is the artists that I showcase here. Go and look at their work. Go and look at the stuff they do. And if you like them, follow them. And if you like them, retweet their stuff or spread it around, show it to other people, because that's really the bread and butter of artists online, is people taking an interest and taking enough of an interest to share their work. That's what I'm hoping is going to come out of this. Now, they submitted this particular piece, which, as far as I can tell, it's made in traditional, but digital looks better. I'm not sure if that means that part of the piece is made traditionally and part of it is digital, if the whole thing is digital. Nonetheless, so we've got a black and white thing going on here, which is pretty effective for the subject matter. We've got lots of skulls going on. In fact, can't we make it maybe a little bit larger? Yes, there we go. So we've got some skulls and bones going on and a lot of blackness. Now, one of the things that happens when you do this kind of style is the image kind of flattens. And that, to me, it creates kind of an interesting feeling, because this is clearly a hellscape. Like, there is bad juju going on in this picture, with the broken angel wings and the sort of Helsing-ish signals going on and the noose around the neck. That's kind of dark. And I kind of like this flat sensation, because it almost gives the feeling of, you know, if I imagine hell, I imagine all of it being present everywhere all at once. Like, this is something I'm thinking in terms of artists like Hieronymus Bosch and older classical artists who work perfectly, like, they knew how to do perfectly, you know, mathematically correct perspectives in their pictures, but often chose not to because they wanted the feeling that was kind of conveyed by a more flat sensation. I don't know if that's intentional in this picture, but whether it's intentional or not, it's something that I feel kind of works. It gives the picture this quality of kind of coming at you all the time, which is pretty good for a subject material that is as sharp as this is. In terms of improvement, I might show off more of the wings, really. Like, I might twist the character a little bit so that the wings are a little bit more on display. Maybe something like that, but honestly, it's quite a nice atmospheric piece, and the use of the digital, I think it's a digital effect with the light in the middle and the darkness all around, or maybe it's just an effect if it was photographed with a phone camera, but that kind of, again, works for the mood of the piece. I quite like that, actually. Then we have Ninja Charlie T. He worked on a piece based off Shurima concept art. Since the sun disk is a sort of dam, I've put a little twist on it by adding more green to the environment instead of just desert. And he's working on an unannounced standalone game. Interesting. So this is quite pretty, I have to say. Let's see if we can't open an original and hope that it's very large and nice. Ooh. Oh, that is very pretty. Now, I'm not sure about the production method, whether this is a fully digital illustration piece. I think it probably is, or if it's some variety of also including photo manipulation, which is something that's very common in concept art today. It's something we talked about when we talked about the aesthetics of Targon back in that video, if anyone remembers that. A lot of the artists who do environment concepts for games like League of Legends like to use photo elements, particularly from stock photos, and incorporate them into the art to give it sort of more of a sense of realism, more of a sense of place. But something I really like that what he brought up is that he's taken the Shurima thing, right? Because that's the thing that in the lore of League of Legends, you have the sun disk, which creates water out of thin air. Like, it magically creates water. That's why it's so powerful in a desert nation like Shurima. It creates the literal, you know, water that sustains life. And so, taking a concept of literally turning the sun disk, rather than the sun disk being this thing hovering over like a pyramid in the desert, the sun disk hovers over an oasis. That's actually a really clever idea. Oh, and by the way, all the birds that are flying around in the picture, there's a couple of clever things going on there. First of all, they add some texture to the image. They add some life and a sensation of things being alive in the image, but they also deepen the perspective. See, because the thing that can happen when you do a picture like this is that it can become a little bit unclear exactly how far away everything is from everything else, in the sense that, like, how big is the sun disk? Because what the human eye needs is reference points for perspective, right? So and that's, by the way, is something, if you notice, I actually just thought up, if you notice stuff like landscape paintings, like the really great ones, like that try to show some kind of grand, majestic landscape, especially the romantic painters liked to include at least a few humans in their pictures for scale. If you know the Reddit meme, banana for scale, that's essentially what's going on here. When you include a human figure into the picture, you give a human mind an immediate sense of, oh, what's the relative size of everything that's going on here? And so the human figures down here help give us a relative scale for just how freaking big this sun disk is. And the same thing with the trees, and indeed the same thing with the birds. It gives us a sense of this thing as this grand mountain-sized thing, almost, that towers over everything. And they also help because you can see that these birds here are clearly a lot closer than the birds down there. It creates more of a sliding scale of depth of field. Like, it creates a sliding scale of perspective that helps make the lake and these structures in the background seem to be further away. Because what I was trying to get at is when you have these grand scale images where it can be really hard for the human mind to form a useful sense of scale between things, it can be really, really helpful to have some objects in the image that can kind of give the human mind something to key off of, some sliding scale of depth and relative size that can help ground the image. And if you don't have those, that's when you can get an image where, yeah, it looks big, but it doesn't feel big, which is generally not something that you want. Okay, moving in. Ooh, here's an illustration piece. This is Samus, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, who's submitting a fan art piece for a music video, a Vocaloid music video. That's a Vocaloid music video featuring Nicki Minaj, if I'm not mistaken. Possibly, anyway. And it looks like, it looks like so. Oh, actually, that's quite nice. So I don't know a lot about Vocaloid, so I genuinely can't really comment on that aspect of it, but in terms of composition, this is actually really quite good. So there's two things I notice immediately in this image. Is there a bigger version if we go to the browser? Yeah, slightly bigger. Nice. So there's two things I notice immediately in this picture. The first thing is the composition of the characters, like how are they positioned relative to each other, and the second thing is the light. I think I might be getting sick, because there's a couple of interesting things going on with the light. Light in pictures, like especially if you look at traditional paintings, is used as highlighter. Like that's literally how light is used in a lot of traditional painting, is if you want the audience to pay attention to a thing, put light on it. Like just highlight it, have a beam of sunlight hitting it, or like just have it lit up, or have it be brighter compared to everything else, and you highlight the thing. And that kind of feels like the thing that's going on here with the way that the artist is using light. And you get this very different sense of mood between a character like this, who's much more lit up, versus the character here, who is much more covered in shade and shadow. Now, I'm not 100% sure I can see where the light source is coming from, because as far as I can tell, it's either up here or... yeah, it's not entirely consistent, but that's not actually a problem, because like I said, the light here is not really about being natural or realistic. The light is about highlighting certain things. And the light is also being used quite cleverly on all the machine parts in the background, like all the junk that they're sitting on. If that had just been colored a uniform shade without strong highlights, which is what it has, then you wouldn't really get that sense of the heap. Like, it would look too flat. Even if you put strong shadows on it, without that powerful highlight, you would get a sensation of something that was quite flat, in fact. And that's the clever thing, is that it is quite flat. Like, it has a very uniform color between all of the different components, have pretty much just one or two colors between them, but because of the use of the light, you don't get that sensation of the whole thing being flat. And that's where we come back to the composition of the characters, because when you compose a series of characters in an image, one of the best things you can do in order to create a sense of depth, a sense of placement and scene, is to have the characters overlap with each other. And that's something when you're an artist, and especially if you're a young artist, you kind of don't want to do that, because you want to show off. Like, I don't want to cover up part of the character. I want to show off the character. I want to show off the whole thing. But you should kind of try to resist that instinct, because if you let characters overlap, if you let them be in front of each other and get in each other's way, that gives much more of a sense of connection, first of all, between the characters, but also much more of a sense of depth in the image. And it also helps you set up stuff like, you know, character archetype interplay and how do they relate to each other on a personal level. And that's being implemented rather effectively here. I feel like I can see some hints of the artist kind of wanting to show off as much as possible, but notice how the hooded girl in the front here, who really does need to be clearly in front of the other characters in order for her placement to work with the light source, kind of overlapping Miku just a little bit, just enough to let us know that she's in the foreground by comparison. The same thing with this little hair strand, just overlapping the dude on the right's leg here a little bit, and his leg being hidden a little bit behind some of the scrap pile that Hatsune Miku is sitting on, and this dude over here just being kind of in front of her foot. All of that creates a connection between these characters, and almost a physical connection, even though they're not touching. Their surface areas in the images touching, and that creates a connection between them. Whereas something I see a lot of artists do, something I've done a lot myself, if you place each character on their own in an image, you can create a sense of distance and disconnection. And sometimes that's what you want. You want to have the characters feel disconnected from one another, but in this instance, it feels like there should be a connection. Like, these people are clearly a group of some kind, so having that connection be present is quite a good idea. Okay, moving in. Oh, that's quite nice. Let's have a look at this. Okay, so let's see. This is Filleis, a set of custom cards for a game I made. I made the cards. The game is One Night Ultimate Werewolf. I'm not familiar with that game. I am an amateur artist, 15 years old. So this is a young artist showing off the beginnings of their craft. So let's have a look at that. Now, this is clearly made by a beginner. And it's easy to be dismissive of that. It's very easy to say, "Oh, go practice. You're not very good at stuff." And from a technical perspective, yes, there's a whole lot to work with here. And also the image seems to be upside down. Let me see if I can't fix that. Dun, 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 dun. Let's see. That's a vertical flip, right? Yeah, there we go. And also a horizontal one. There. That happens sometimes with my camera, by the way. When I take pictures of things, they get flipped upside down for some reason, and I don't know why that happens, and it's really annoying. So let's take a look at, because there's actually something interesting going on here on the level of composition. Now, again, I don't know the game. I don't know what the context is for each of these cards, but take a look at some of the cleverness that's actually going on here. Hunter, for instance. We've got a creature in the middle being struck by something while moving through a forested area. And that's one very specific kind of composition. Like where you have a sense of place from the objects being placed in the image, and then the creature in the middle being hit, drawing the eye with the various effect lines, and then compare and contrast that to something like this image down here, which is this 10-sided creature, sort of space tentacle creature, almost a little bit Vel'Koz-like, having a thought of something happening on itself. And the thing I notice is that there seems to be a very intentional series of compositions happening with a lot of these images, where I don't know if that's intentional or if it's just by instinct, but for instance here, the placement of the skeleton's head in the card is actually aligned pretty well with the golden ratio. And here there's a good sense of placing the important thing, the person turning into the werewolf, in the middle of the image, and then surrounding them with decorations that kind of help draw the eye to the thing that's going on there. And that's and I bring this up because this is something that's actually kind of important to remember, is even if your technical skill can't always live up to the ideas that you have in your head, that doesn't mean you can't create something interesting. It doesn't mean you can't create interesting visual compositions. It doesn't mean you can't have interesting visual ideas. The prime example for this is One Punch Man. If you go and read the original One Punch Man manga by One, the artist is literally called One, you'll see what I mean. It's really not about the technical skills so much as it's about what kinds of visual ideas can you communicate with those skills. Okay, moving on to... Oh, there's actually something interesting going on here. So let's have a look at what the artist has to say. This is Mini God. Their first commission was very cheap because they wanted to know how far they can push themselves. Yeah, that happens. Studying to become a game artist. A generic elven elementalist. Doesn't have a full story, but she fell in love with an orc shaman and they share knowledge to teach each other. So, first of all, the rendering on this thing is quite gorgeous. It's got that digital art feel that can sometimes happen where it feels very smooth, which may have been intentional. Like, it depends on the purpose for which the piece was made. But there is a very, very smooth, almost kind of ceramic feeling about the whole piece, which I think is generated in part by these leaves here, which I think are meant to be some kind of jewelry rather than natural leaves, which is quite interesting. Like, you can see the highlights that are being used all over the leaves that give them this kind of glossy sensation. I do like what's going on with the backgrounds here because, again, backgrounds are something that you can use to frame an image. Like, if you think back to the group picture we were talking about a little while ago, the characters there were very much part of the background. Like, they were integrated into the background. The scrap heap of metal that they were sitting on was the stage that they were acting upon. Here, the background is acting much more like just a backdrop to create a feeling and a sense of place, but without taking center stage or becoming part of the composition of the character themselves. The composition of the character is separate from the background. And that, again, is a tool that you can use as an artist if you want, depending on what you want to draw the audience's attention to it, depending on what you want them to pay attention to. And here, what we're being asked to pay attention to is the expression on the elf's face as she looks at the bird here, who I can only... The bird, by the way, is drawn really well. I really dig the way those wings look. Which I can only infer that the bird is carrying some kind of message from the orc shaman, who the elf is in love with. And so you get this expression that's kind of communicates curiosity and a sense of quiet longing. But it's also a very blank expression that's benefiting a lot from me knowing some of the backstory that's going on there. And by the way, I really love the embroidering on the shirt. That's just really... I don't have the patience for this. Like, when I'm doing artwork, like, I'll find a texture and I'm just gonna overlay it on my artwork, and I'm not gonna... But the thing I like in particular is this is not just embroidery. Like, it's not just a pattern that has been drawn on top of the character. It's embroidery that feels like it is... Like, if you ran your hand across it, you could feel every seam that's going on. Like, it's really, like, bulging a little bit out from the underlying fabric. And that's really hard to do. And I'd be curious to actually study this a little bit more to figure out, because it's the lighting that's doing it, as well as a little bit of breaking of the outline. I'd actually be interested to take a closer look at that later. Let's see, Jones, or Jonas, I'm again not sure how to... This artwork is my pride. He's a yordle who is a kingpin in Bilgewater and the leader of Bilgewater's black market. He's crazy rich and sees his allies as nothing but expendable goons. Okay. Here we can talk about composition once again. So, the story of this guy is that he's a black market kingpin who sees everything that isn't money as expendable, essentially. Take a look at how he's posed in the picture. Take a look at how he relates to the rest of what's going on in the image. He is looking down on you. His eyeline is above, like our eyeline as the viewing audience is somewhere, I think, around here, which places us below him. Like if this was a camera picture that would have been taken by someone with a phone, where would they be standing relative to the dude below him? That puts him in a position of power above us. This is the basics of composition. And because he's looking down at us, literally looking down on us, you get that sensation of detachment. Like, this is something, every time you see a character in a fantasy story who's being brought before someone, like they're in chains, they're being brought before someone, and then that character has to judge them or something. Maybe it's like, oh, they trespassed on our land, O king. Take a look at what the camera angle tends to do, because the camera angle will almost always be below the eyeline of the person in power looking up at him. Like, it's a thing that's used everywhere, but it's something that can be hard to remember to do when you want to communicate the mood and the character of a character in a particular image. And that's being used really well here. I think that's actually... That's really quite good. That's the kind of thing you need to keep in mind, by the way, when you're doing stuff like a splash art, which needs to communicate so much character so fast. Those kinds of compositional basics will save your ass from doing a bland splash art. This is something I could talk about at length, but if you think, a character we've talked about recently, Illaoi. If you look at Illaoi's splash art, take a look at where she is placed relative to the viewer, air quotes, in that image. And it's the same kind of thing that's going on here, but taken to an even stronger extreme. This is a picture, this is Sill, a picture I drew for Pride Month. It's a portrait, which is unusual for them because they usually do full body shots. They wanted to draw an afro. So this is there's an experiment going on here. Any constructive criticism you can give. Okay, so I'm gonna take the liberty to be a little more critical from this one. Now, this is a traditionally made picture, and I haven't worked with traditional media in quite a long time, to be honest, because I'm addicted to control Z. Like, I want to be able to undo. I really need it. I can't with erasers and stuff. I don't have the patience for it. So with that in mind, I don't know much about working with traditional media anymore. I've forgotten most of the stuff I used to know. So as for constructive criticism, I mean, I really dig the use of colors. Like, I really dig the very bright, saturated pride colors going on in the lipstick in the background, contrasted against the much darker tones of the character themselves. Like, that's just good basics, y'all. That's really just what that is. So, insofar as constructive criticism goes, I would probably deepen the shadows a lot more on the character, which is something, again, this is something that's probably hard to do in traditional media, and it's also something that's really risky when you have a character with darker skin. You have to be careful about how you use shades and shadows, because at least in my work, I've noticed when you have a character who has darker skin, if you put just a little bit too much of a shadow on them, you can accidentally make them look like they're not part of the same scene as other characters. And this is partly due to my inexperience working with those color tones, because, like, big surprise, I'm Danish. I mostly draw on light-skinned characters. It's something I definitely need to practice more. And there are some challenges associated with it that you kind of have to keep in mind when it comes to composition. But what I would do is darken a lot of the shadows on the figure in order to give more depth to the image, because something I'm kind of missing is, especially with this gorgeous afro, more sense of volume. So, like, and that's a really difficult texture to render, by the way. I'm not sure I could actually do a better job, but the thing I would experiment with would be adding more dark shadows around the hair and more highlights to kind of really emphasize the volume of the thing, and to really kind of emphasize that it has a lot of texture. It has a lot of peaks and valleys that result from the natural texture of the hair. Yeah, and I'd give a much stronger shadow under the chin, for example, in order to heighten the separation between the two things. And I'd give more shadows on the sides of the face, maybe, or at least around the nose, to make the glasses look a little bit more like they're coming out from behind the ears. But that's pretty much all I can think of. Really, I don't really have much of expertise to give constructive advice when it comes to working with traditional media, because like I said, this picture might look really, really different in real life, because cameras, especially phone cameras, are just not nice to pastel colors and watercolors, and just traditional colors is something I've noticed. It can be really bloody hard to get it to show up in digital form the same way it does in reality. Let's see, JakiPop, this is Nightcrawler from the X-Men. He's one of the better things I've ever drawn. I tried to capture the swashbuckling feel of him with this piece, and I think it kind of works. Well, let's have a look then. Ooh, that's a very high resolution. Okay. Oh, it's a picture, right. Okay, Nightcrawler. I don't remember much about his character design specifics, but I do know he has those weird-ass feet going on with the uneven number of limbs. Now, feet and hands are like the things that most artists just struggle with, and the biggest challenge that any artist has is just to have the courage to try and do it. Because that's something, if you want to tell if someone is a beginning artist, if they like to hide the hands and the feet in the picture, if they kind of like to not have to draw those things, and you see that as a tendency across them, that's like, I've done that. Everybody I know has done that at some point, because it's just, God, I want to draw something, but I don't want to deal with hands. God damn it. I don't want to deal with feet. So, the idea is to capture the swashbuckling feel of the character, and that's actually not a bad idea at all, to have him wield the rapier in his tail. I don't know if Nightcrawler's tail is canonically that prehensile, but, I mean, it's comics, so he's had all superpowers at some point. Doesn't really matter. It gets a little dark with the blood splash and the hand kind of down there, and then he's got these sort of this happy smile and his half-lidded eyes and their peers. Like, that's an interesting contrast in tone. But yeah, in terms of, like, it does capture a character who is very confident, who's very perhaps a little bit cocky and a little bit full of themselves, like the way he's kind of leaning with the hands over and the smile thing going on. So in terms of capturing that kind of feeling, I quite like that. I also like the little detail of the nicks on the sword blade. That's something that's, if you want to give a sword a little bit of character, giving it a few nicks on the blade is a really good thing. I also, this is just my personal thing, but I love seeing sketch lines on a picture. Like, I love seeing all the things that the artist has already tried and been like, no, it's not good enough, I'm going to try again, and I'm going to try again, and I'm going to try again. Because that's the thing, especially with digital art, you don't have to show your sketch lines ever. Like, you never have to show your mistakes. There never has to be a little bit of white out on a place where you have made some kind of a screw up, or where you've changed your mind. But I really do love seeing sketch lines like that, because they're kind of a mark of someone who's actually put in some effort. I kind of like pictures more when I can really see that the artist has been noodling at them than if it looks like they kind of got them right the first time. Somehow there's more personality to it. Oh, this video is already running long, but I swear to God, I want to get through some more of these. So we have Carrera, who has a comic called Mouse and the Sheep in Wolf Clothing, I think. Let's have a look if that's what it's called. Going to be a link to that down in the description. And there is an interesting visual style going on. And now, when I first saw this, I actually asked the artist, is this inspired from Hellsing? And the guy who draws that, his name escapes me right now. No, I can't remember. But Hellsing, the Empire, and they said, no, that's actually not inspired from that point. But it looks quite like it, and that's a really good comparison, because something that Hellsing is better at than perhaps any other manga of its type is giving character to faces, and there's something clever going on here. Now, first of all the freckles are just kind of an unusual thing to see. You don't see a lot of characters with freckles, or if you do, they just kind of have a few freckles hanging around the bridge of their nose, but here we've got freckles going like all the way down. That's a nice thing to include, and it's especially interesting to see that in black and white, because again, when we do freckles, we tend to do them on redheads or strawberry blondes and stuff like that. Seeing that in a person with dark hair, that's striking, that's interesting. But the thing the thing that draws your eye immediately in this picture particularly is the eyes. And that's because of two things. First of all, the human brain's programmed to look for eyes. Like, if there's eyes somewhere in a picture, the human brain will search for them immediately and find them before it starts looking for any other details. But second of all, well, it essentially comes down to, if we take a very close look, it comes down to the scribbles. And that's, again, this is the thing that drew my comparison to Hellsing, because something Hellsing really likes to do is to really over-render the eyes, like really do a hell of a lot of detail and a hell of a lot of stuff around the eyes of the character. And because the eyes are the window to the soul, and I know that's a cliche, but that's really how the mind works. If you want a character to be identifiable, give them eyes, give them big eyes, give them very obvious eyes. So when you have all these scribbly lines, all this rendering going on around the eyes, what it gives is the impression of a character who has a lot of stuff going on inside them, who might be, you know, maybe they're exhausted, maybe they're tired, maybe they're stressed out, or maybe they're just kind of got an intense mood going on. It can imply all sorts of things, but the thing it universally does is draw attention and captivate. You can overuse it, of course. I don't suggest that you make all of your characters have eyes exactly like that, but it's one tool that is actually quite effective to use. Then we have Les Boyd. Oh, that's a good name. One of my favorite pieces yet, Dark Star Thresh for my friend's birthday. There's a little present inside the black hole. It's a bit off model because it's a redraw of something, and then they have a Tumblr. Excellent. And a YouTube channel. We're going to link to that one as well. Ooh, the colors on this one are gorgeous. Oh, those colors are really pretty. Oh, this to me looks like watercolor. I might be wrong about that, but it does. But that's at least what it looks like to me. But it's traditional media once again, something I've not got a whole lot of experience working in. But it's something when I've been doing drawings of like Star Guardians and stuff, I've kind of had to dip into this kind of glittery aesthetic, and I'm just so pleased to see it executed so well. I can't quite remember what Dark Star Thresh looks like, but this looks pretty correct, and I'm just gonna gush for a little while because look at the way they're using colors here. Everything here in this picture is like pretty much just mostly purple. Like purple, 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 and then with a little bit of cyan and a little bit of you know, bright greens and blues going on here and there, but mostly purple. But take a look at how many different things you can do with just purple. You have these dark streaks of purple going around here, and these almost lightish pink streaks heading over into a bright pink, rather, especially around the orb that he's holding up, and then here the stray, like the different color bands that's going on. That's really the power of watercolor. It can create so much texture in an image, which is why I've kind of wanted to learn to work with watercolors, because you can get that texture, not just the paper texture, but the texture of the colors blending smoothly into each other. And then just the little glitter effects here are just kind of delightful. I really like this piece. This is really good. This is charming. This is really fun. Like, it makes this horrifying monstrosity actually look kind of adorable. Let's see. Efreet is a section of a comic project based on the League comics, a short story for Warwick, the point where he steps out of the shadows and the girl begins to run. Was done with the pencil tool in Procreate after I'd just gotten my iPad. This is done on an iPad. Good lord. And they have an Instagram. It's got some nude models on it, so be careful what you click on. So let's have a look at that. Now, I'm not familiar with Procreate, actually. If I remember correctly, it's a program that models it that sells itself on having access to a lot of traditional style tools. I think I should actually... You really need, if you're going to search for Procreate on Google, you really need to specify that it's the app you're looking for and not the other thing, because that could go very wrong. Is that the thing I'm thinking of? Okay, we'll figure that out later. Doesn't matter. So this is done on an iPad. That to me is... I've tried drawing on an iPad. I find the surface is just way too slippery. I just can't get a good... I'm so used to the texture of my Wacom tablet. I just can't get a good grip on it. So I don't remember Warwick's story well enough to really express the context, but there's something interesting going on here. Look at how Warwick is bulging around where the Hextech chemicals and stuff are being put in. Like, he really looks like there's scar tissue everywhere. It really looks like he's been through a gruesome set of mutations, really. Like, this really does look like the moment the monster stumbles out from the lair. It almost looks a little bit like, if not for the color, it would look kind of like a piece out of an old black and white monster movie, where the monstrosity stumbles into light for the first time and you get a full view, and then the audience screams behind you because it's the 1950s and nobody knows what good special effects look like yet. But notice the use of color, by the way. This is a simple trick, but one that always works, is to have a black and white picture and then just color in the things that you want to highlight. That works in Schindler's List, And it works here. It works pretty much any time you want to use it, because the human eye responds so strongly to that contrast. Unless they're colorblind, of course, in which case it's not gonna do much for you, but it's worth a shot anyway. Yeah, this is, like, the atmosphere here is really quite good. I think there could be more could be done with light and shadow in terms of deepening the space a little bit to make it kind of a deeper, darker alleyway, but really there's a lot of atmosphere going on here. I really dig the texture on the fur. I don't know if that's just 100 million billion scribbles or if they had a really cool brush or something. That's quite good. I do like the detail on the hex tech thing. Like, it really does look like it's made of old, weathered, beaten metal that has kind of been, you know, strapped together for some kind of alchemy experiment. That's really quite good. Let's see, Ness. Fan out of Ness from Earthbound, trying to make him look kind of time-worn, like he's been through rough times. They don't post anything else anywhere, so that's just going to be their Discord link. Okay, I'm going to try and post that in the description. So Ness from Earthbound. Now, doing a fan art of Ness is kind of a difficult thing to... Because, like, Ness... In terms of character design, Ness is, like, one step removed from Kirby. Like, he's extremely simplistic. Like, and that's part of the charm of Earthbound, of course, is that the characters are so simplistic and so easy to relate to. So doing a fan art of him, like, the things that are going on here, there's a change in proportions, like most obviously the head size and the fact that he has a neck now. And that actually does add a lot, because one of the things that the original Earthbound art style does is it lends the characters this kind of slight tinge of unreality to them. And so by breaking those proportions, by breaking that into something that looks much more like a realistic character, you create a very different feeling around. Like, even if we didn't have, you know, the band-aid and the black eye, you know, and the scratches and the melancholy expression and stuff, what you'd get would be something that affects people on an emotional level very differently than original cheerful little, you know, McDonald's toy figurine Ness does. And that's actually quite an interesting idea. Yeah. I mean, they've pretty much succeeded in what they set out to do. Like, they wanted to make him look more time-worn, like he's been through rough times, and that definitely comes across. Storyboard base for an Osu map for the song I Write Sins Not Tragedies by Panic at the Disco that I made for a mapper. I took the lyrics and tried to illustrate them into a character using the overarching theme of a rose and replicate the aesthetic of the cover work from the era the song was released. Logo in the middle is the band's. Okay. Oh, that was really hard to read, that image in the thumbnail. It looked like a very different thing. But that's, oh, we've got garters going on and arms and bleeding and, ooh, wow. This is a very dark piece. That's actually, oh, there's some interesting stuff going on. Now, remember how we talked in the very first piece we did in this video? Good lord, this video is almost 45 minutes long. Remember the first piece we talked about, how we talked about flatness, how you can use flatness to impart a certain feeling? That's going on here as well, because of the very thin outlines, and because it's a black and white picture for the most part. And there really isn't any shading going on, especially on the dress, the clothes that they're wearing here. You get this sensation of extreme flatness, and that's what made it kind of hard to read. Like when it was in a thumbnail, it was kind of hard to see exactly what was going on in the picture. But then once you get closer, you realize, oh, that's a human figure, and it's one that has the hair hanging down in front of the face, like they're part of a Japanese horror movie, and they're wearing garters. There's an interesting interplay here between sexuality as implied by the lingerie they're wearing and the, you know, the reveal of the thighs, and then monstrosity, not just by the blood and the claws and stuff, but also take a look at the way that the hips and just the flesh is rendered. That doesn't look soft and sensual. That looks very hard and very unpleasant, and mixing sexual imagery with stuff that looks harsh and unpleasant is one of the staples of the horror genre. Like, something they do all the time. The alien from Alien is very much a mix of that kind of the sensual with the unpleasant. I'm struggling. There's a specific word I'm looking for. Unaesthetic? No. The sensuous with the unsensuous. as it were, like a thing that's pleasant to touch versus a thing that isn't, and that's actually working really efficiently. I also really dig the dark curtain hanging down there, like it's the character's hair hanging down in front of them, because again, it does this because the image is so flat, you kind of can't parse what the hell is this, and then you realize, oh god, it's the hair, and then you realize what kind of pose the character is taking, and then they become even scarier than they were already. That's actually quite clever. As for constructive criticism, like because my immediate instinct would be to, oh, you need to, you know, make the outlines clearer and put more depth into the image so people can see what's going on. But on the other hand, having the image be very flat kind of heightens the creepy mood of it in a way, I think. Okay, 45 minutes, good lord. Okay, this is probably going to have to be the last one. Kyrosh has posted a D&D character who's a merfolk anthropologist and very interested in other races. Interesting. Anthropologist. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, right. So we have a very humanoid mer person. This is something that's kind of in the vein of the same kind of design as Kisame from Naruto, actually. There's kind of the same thing going on, and kind of the same clever things going on in terms of the design. Webbed hands is a good way to do that in terms of making a character connected to the sea. Webbed hands or webbed fingers is a very good way to do that. It's not clear whether they have webbed feet as well, which would also work, but that's kind of good. There's some mixing going on in the aesthetics here, because we have a character who's very, very humanoid, which might be a little bit of a... It takes them kind of away from the connection to the sea, because we associate humanoid with land walking, just generally as a species, which is why when you see characters that are really... When you do really good takes on mermaids, they tend to incorporate a lot more fish features into them, which is one of the problems with Nami's character design. Yeah, so in terms of what's being said, like I said, I don't want to be too critical, but in terms of what's being said, that the character was an anthropologist and that they were a mer person, I'm not sure I can tell anthropologist just from the character design, but maybe I'm not supposed to. This kind of looks like they're without all of their gear. Like this is the base pose upon which you place the gear, almost like a cutout doll. But there is, like, the red eyes are actually kind of clever. Actually kind of good, because they have the same tone as the gills on the side, so they kind of... There's this connection between the inhumanity of the gills and that being reflected in the eyes as well. From a character design perspective, that's actually quite effective. I might have liked to see the rest of the fins be colored the same bright red color to kind of tie all that together, all the monstrous elements. This is, the reason I'm struggling here is that it's just a good drawing. Like, I don't have a lot to say. It's just perfectly well drawn. Like, good proportions, like the good sense of placement. I really like the definition of the muscle tone on the characters. It's the charming expression. I like the looking away thing, because it's too tempting when you're doing characters to have them look at the audience or have them look kind of off to the side, but having that up and away look, that's actually, in terms of the character being an anthropologist, that's actually not a bad pose to take, because that looking up and away with kind of a smile on the face indicates a character who's being thoughtful about something, who's thinking of something that is elsewhere. And that, for an intellectually inclined character or a very curious character, those are actually not bad things to do. I want to do one more, but this video is too long already. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going to try and do more of these, because there were so many good submissions, and like, we haven't gotten to... There's so many. I'm scrolling through them right now, and there's so many good ones I want to talk about, but it's really hard to, because you know me, once I start talking, I don't stop talking. And the years start coming, and they don't stop coming. Fed to the rules, and I hit the ground running. Anyway, my name has been TV Sky, and thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked it, there's a like button. If you disliked it, then there is a dislike button. And I can't think of a good story to make up about the dislike button, because I'm still scrolling through all these pictures that I want to talk about. But you can hit it if you like. It's okay. I mean, I don't have a contract with a hitman anymore, so it's safe now. If you don't want to, that's perfectly fine as well. I have a Patreon that you can support. If you want access to the Discord, then if you donate any amount whatsoever per month, then you get access to the Discord, or you can try your luck. Underneath every single new video I post, there's going to be a link that's good for 25 uses. And I try to also occasionally post links over in the community tab, so there are plenty of ways to get into the Discord. It's just I try to limit the influx of people so that I can actually... so that it doesn't run away from me again, essentially. I'm rambling because I'm just so impressed by all the things that have been submitted. I'm genuinely really impressed by them. Should I just do a 3-hour video where I talk about all of them? I feel like maybe I should. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'm gonna shut up now.